So this discussion today will focus on the phases of the polygraph examination as well as on the limitations in the conduct of the lie detector test. We will also be discussing in this episode the various major parts of the polygraph. So when we say polygraph, I'm referring to the instrument that is used in the detection of deception. So this is just a continuation of the first and second set of discussions. So basically, there are four major parts of the polygraph machine. The first one is the pneumograph. The second one is the Accuracy. The third one is the Galvanograph. And the fourth one is what we call as the Chemograph. So the pneumograph records the changes of the breathing of the subject. An adult in rest with normal inspiration may inhale about 500 cc of air. A less similar amount is also exhaled. So ang combination sa inhalation and exhalation would equal to what we call as respiration. In addition to the tidal air, we can inhale another 1,500 cc of air called, we call this one as complementary air. After normal expiration, we say expiration, kanang pagginhawa nimo, a similar amount is exhaled. Ang tawag ani is supplementary air. Now, the pneumograph is the part of the polygraph machine that will record the changes of the breathing of the subject. Again, the breathing of the subject would consist the inhalation and the exhalation. Okay? Now, as what you can see on the screen, kani nga portion kani muna ginatawag og the pneumograph. Okay? The pneumograph which will be attached to the body of the subject. In what part of the body of the subject? Now, take a look on this picture. Kaning niyo muna subject. Ako ni. This is the photograph that I took last 2015 during our training, 2 months training in forensic investigation and law enforcement, wherein we had a hands-on specialization on polygraphy or polygraph. So kani dire kay ako may subject, makita nimo or makita ninyo gi-attached ang pneumograph 1 ug pneumograph 2. Duha ni kabuk ha. Ang pneumograph 1 will be attached to the abdomen part of the subject. When I say abdomen, kay dapit sa tiyan. On the other hand, the pneumograph 2 will be attached on the chest part of the person. Nganong apil man ang chest part? Apil ang chest part simply because during respiration, during inhalation or exhalation, duha ka parts that are mainly involved. Okay? Aside from the lungs, aside from the internal organs, ang changes sa respiration would be indicated based on the contraction of the chest and the abdomen part. So muna diha gi-attached ang pneumo 1 ug ang pneumo 2. Okay? So unsa may gina-record sa pneumograph? Pneumograph again is the major part of the polygraph machine which will record the changes of the breathing of the person. Asa gi-attached siya sa number 1, the abdomen part, number 2 sa chest part sa subject. The next major part is what we call as galvanograph. Galvanograph records the skin resistance of the subject to a very small amount of electricity. Ang tawag ani nga small amount of electricity as what we discussed in the previous discussion, ang tawag ani is ohms. Okay? Ohms, ang smallest amount of electricity. So galvanograph or the galvanometer will record the resistance of the skin to the ohms. And ohms is the smallest amount of electricity. The galvanograph or the GSR comprises finger or palm electrodes. It runs about 4 or 7 seconds when reaction takes place. The galvanograph, take note guys, is the most accurate of all the 3 components in chart interpretation. It is considered as the most precise among the three divisions. Without its recording, 30% of accurate chart interpretation is lost. Perhaps the question right now is, why is galvanograph considered the most accurate among the major components of a polygraph machine? If you can notice in the previous slide, kung inyo makitaan, ang pneumograph will be the one to record the respiration, changes of the respiration of the subject. But take note that the changes could be manipulated. Ngano mang ma-manipulate nimo ang imong respiration? Kay pwede man og muginhawa kag paspas. Pwede po kag muginhawa og lalom. Pwede po kag imong gihold ang imong gininhawa, and that changes can be recorded to a pneumograph. So therefore, the responses of the pneumograph or the changes of the pneumograph can be physically manipulated by the subject, but in the galvanograph, whether the subject likes it or not, the responses can never be controlled, can never be manipulated, because the galvanograph will record the skin resistance, and you cannot control your skin resistance to the amount of electricity. So muna ginatawag siya og the most accurate. Now, asa man gi-attached ang galvanograph? Okay? As what you can see on your screen, galvanograph will be attached asa una, index finger of the subject. Ikaduha, ring finger of the subject. So what you can see on this picture, naa niya ang thumb, index, middle, ring, ug ang little finger. Asa gi-attach gani ang galvanograph? Gi-attach nimo sa una, index finger, ikaduha sa ring finger. Sir, what if the person's hand is amputated, like there is no index finger? Asa man nimo gibutang? So pwede nimo gibutang diri siya sa thumb finger kung wala ang index finger. But if in case the person has a normal hand, like there are 5 fingers, pwede nimong i-attach dito sa, or it should be attached to the index una, tapos ang usa i-attach nimo sa ring finger. The third component of the polygraph machine is what we call Ascorgiosphimograph. If the pneumograph will record the changes of the respiration, while galvanograph will record on the skin resistance to a smallest amount of electricity, Ascorgiosphimograph on the other hand will record 2 changes. Una, the blood pressure of the person. Second, pulse rate of the subject. It consists of an arm cuff that is placed around the arm of the subject with a covered rubber bladder, part centered at the brachial artery, about an inch from the elbow. Pressure is measured in millimeters of mercury. Pulse rate per minute may be counted by multiplying the number of beats counted in 1 division by 12. So, ato lang tawon ang picture. So ako ni nga subject, and this is our polygraph examiner in Forensic Investigation and Law Enforcement Academy in Cebu. So as you can see, naadiri ang pneumograph 1, then pneumograph 2, naka-attach ng galvanograph, tapos kaning niong di-attached 1 inch ha, take note, 1 inch from the elbow. 1 inch from the elbow is what we call as the Accuracy. Okay? Unsay purpose sa Accuracy? It will measure, or it will record the changes of number 1, the pulse rate, number 2, the blood pressure of the person. Asa gibutang? 1 inch from the elbow of the subject. The circulatory system is responsible for the movement of the blood in the veins and arteries throughout the body. Its cycle consists of the systole and diastole. When it is systole, the heart contracts to empty its blood into the circulation. Diastole, on the other hand, the heart relaxes to fill with blood returned by the circulation. So just imagine, sponge, kabantay ka ng foam, na gamiton nimo pag kada maglimpyo ka og plato. So kung imong pugon ang foam, imong gigamit sa paglimpyo sa plato, ang sponge imong gigamit, ang tawag anak sa pagpuga siston. Okay? Kung imo siyang gi-release, makabantay ka nga musuyop siya og soap. Musuyop siya sa sabon. So ang tawag ana sa pagsuyop niya, pag-relax, ang tawag ana is diastole. Okay? So blood pressure refers to the pressure of the circulating blood against the walls of the arteries. In healthy people, blood pressure varies from about 80 to 45 or 80 over 45 in infants to about 120 over 80 at age 30 to about 140 over 85 at age 40 and over. A systolic pressure of much lower than 80 is usually associated with shock. So muna yung average pulse rates per minute. At the end of the fetal life, pwede nga 144 to 133 per minute. At birth and up to 1 year old, 140 to 123. 96 to 76 beat per minute from 10 years old to 15 years old, and 73 to 69 beat per minute from 20 to 25 years old. So again, na-discuss na nato ang tulo ka major parts of the polygraph. At balik ko na, Pneumograph, that will record the changes on the respiration of the subject. Galvanograph, that will record the changes on the skin resistance to a smallest amount of electricity. Number 3, the Accuracy which will record the pulse rate and the blood pressure. The fourth component is what we call as Immograph. Okay, sa previous discussion, ningon ko ninyo nga ang Immograph was introduced by Leonard Keeler. So sa man ang Immograph, the major part, which is Immograph, will not be attached to the body of the subject. Take note, ang Immograph is only a chart drive module. Okay? Chart drive module lang ni. This is a motor that pulls or drives the polygram or the chart paper at the rate of 6 to 12 inches per minute. A chart roll is about 100 feet long, 6 inches wide with 1/2 margin apart. Paper is imprinted with horizontal line spaced at 1/4 inch interval and vertical line with heavy lines at 1/2 inches interval. So ang Immograph again will not be attached to the body of the subject, but the Immograph can be found at or inside the polygraph machine. Kung sa iyang purpose, siya mo itigbira sa polygraph paper or sa polygram. Kaya kung walay tigbira, ang mahitabo, tracings will be in one location only or in one space. So for the tracings or for the recordings to be spread from one point to the other, there has to be a part of the machine that will pull, okay? That will pull the polygram, and that is Immograph. So asa man ang Immograph ani? Okay, kani nga machine. Ang Immograph mao ni polygraph paper ha, kaning puti. Take a look on the cursor nga akong gigamit. Kani moy polygram. Imong abrehon ni kaning paper sa ilalong ani naa diha ang Immograph. Okay? Naa diha ang Immograph, nakasulod siya mo'y tigbira sa papel. So asa man yang bira? Gikan dire iyan ang birahon pagawas. Okay? So kaning mga pens mo ni mo record sa changes sa respiration, sa skin resistance, sa pulse rate o sa blood pressure. Okay? So mo ni sa cardio, pen for the cardio, the pneumo, the galvano. Okay? Duha ka cardio, isa ka pneumo o isa ka galvanograph nga pen. So kaning ang mga attachment diri mao ni katong the Accuracy-Phimograph, the Galvanograph, and the Pneumograph. Kaning niyo mao ni siya mga ink container. Diri ibutang ang ink, tapos ang ink mo travel gikan diri sa container padulong diri sa pen. So diha i-record tanan ang imong mga changes. What you can see on the picture is me trying to make or adjusting the polygraph machine. I in this picture, I um, make or I made a refill on the ink. Then, pagkahuman ani ko ako may numduman, akong ipang-adjust para ang alignment sa pen, dili siya mo overlap. Because if there is overlapping on the recordings, what will happen is, the polygraph examiner may have the difficulty in his interpretation considering nga nag-overlap. So, mas maayo og spread or lagyo ang tracing sa usa ka pen o compared to the other pen. Okay? So lay og color per pen ang sa polygraph machine. So kung muni cardio, lahi ang color sa cardio, lahi ang color sa pneumo, lahi pud ang color sa galvanograph. Polygraph examination is conducted at a polygraph examination room that is 90% soundproof. The subject should not be facing a glass window or another room during the test because outside possible distractions may affect the test responses. So basically, the polygraph examination room does not have any design or features that would distract the attention of the subject. Dapat 90% soundproof. Dili pwede butangan nimo og mirror simply because that will distract him. Okay, if possible, naalang kay table. Tapos, ang bangko anay duha ka arms. Okay, take note. Duha ka arms para mapatong ang left arm o ang right arm. And these two arms of the chair wheel is designed to provide comfortability on the part of the subject. Uses of polygraphy. So, muna yung mga gamit. Significance of having polygraph examination. It is an investigative aid for investigation to confirm statements from the victim, ascertain the credibility of witnesses, assess truthfulness of suspects. It speeds the process of investigation. It eliminates innocent subjects, especially if there are an array or a list of subjects. Let us say you have 20 suspects. Okay, you have 20 suspects. So it would actually make a delay if you will go from one investigation to one person, from one person to the other. If the investigation will focus from person A to the last person, what will happen is it will be dragging and it will take a lot of time for the investigation to finish. So, mas maayo og mogamit ka og polygraph examination para at least ang katong innocent suspects will automatically be eliminated and you can concentrate to a handful suspects. Okay? It can identify other persons involved. Now, here are the limitations of the use of polygraphy. Hinumdumin ninyo ni ha. Muna yung mga limitasyon nga di sa paggamit sa polygraphy. It is accurate only as the examiner is competent. It is very important that the polygraph examiner is competent in the field of polygraph examination. Because if the polygraph examiner lacks training and experience in the field of polygraphy, what will happen is that the tracing or the accurateness of the result would be something that is questionable. It is only an aid to investigation, not a substitute. Number 3 is very important. Take note, polygraph examination shall not be administered without the consent of the subject. Okay? Buot ipasabot, kung dili mo tugot ang subject for him to be involved in a polygraph examination, then so be it. Dili pwede nga mo proceed. You cannot coerce a person to undergo polygraph examination without his volition. Put that in mind. So, kinahanglan nga na-adjoy consent. Okay? Na-adjoy consent o naipagtugot. No indication will be given to any persons or written in any report that a person is guilty because he refuses to take the test. Another important factor, the refusal of a person to undergo polygraph examination shall not be an evidence. In the same way, it shall not have any impact or assumption to the case being investigated. Dili ka pwede mo yun nga, oy, guilty ni kay di man mo take og polygraph examination or mayroon ka nga as nanay sala nakasala ni kay dili man siya ganahang mo take og polygraph examination. Take note again, under the limitation of the polygraphy, if in case the person will insist not to undergo for the polygraph examination, it shall not have any impact to the investigation or to the case being investigated. And you cannot consider a person as guilty because he refuses to take the test. Take note also that the sole agency tasked to determine the innocence or the guilt of the person is no other than the court and the court alone. Okay? Dili pwedeng mingon ang polygraph examiner, dili pwedeng mingon ang criminal investigator nga guilty ang tao. Why? The determination of guilt or the determination of the innocence lies within the responsibility of the court. Walay labot ang PNP or ang polygraph examiner. A test should not be administered until the accusations have been explained to the subject. Examination should not be conducted to an unfit subject. Okay? So if a person is physically unfit, okay, to undergo for the polygraph examination, do not subject him for the test. Okay? There will be no taking of the lie detector test unless the person is physically fit. He must have a good night's sleep for at least 5 hours. O muna restriction ha before the polygraph exam. Meaning if the person lacks sleep kay gatrabaho sa call center, like you only sleep like 3 hours, walay polygraph examination nga mahitabo because the lack of sleep could not create or something that will cause abnormal behaviors of the internal organs or internal responses of the person. Must refrain from smoking at least 2 hours prior to the test. Must not undergo prolonged interrogation or interview prior to the test, and he must not be subjected to any physical abuse or body contact. In addition, must refrain from drinking alcoholic beverages, sedatives, capsules, syrup, whatever kind of drug for at least 12 hours prior to the test. Must not be suffering from temporary illness like headache, toothache, fever, menstruation, for females, severe colds, coughs, etc. As long as it is a temporary illness, dili pwede. Dili pwede kang gigutom. He must not be hungry. He must not have sex indulgence prior to the test. So those are the limitations that you have to consider. The question is, sir, what if the person is amputated? Wala siya kabot, wala siya tiil. Tapos, nakatulog na siya og, let's say, 6 hours. Wala po siya ga-take og drugs. Wala po siya gutoma, wala po siya ga-suffer of temporary illness. Pwede ba nga ma-undergo siya og polygraph examination? In my own opinion, I think that is complicated. You cannot undergo or you cannot allow a person to take for the polygraph examination if he is physically unfit. Asa man nimo gi-attach, wa man siya may parts sa iyang body nga pwede ka nga maka-attach. So katong mga tao nga physically unfit should not be subjected to polygraph examination. Now, so sa polygraph examination natay upat ka stages nga inyong hinumduman jud. Okay? This is very important. And in the board examination, kalagmitan mo gawas dun eh. Phase 1 is the interview to the investigator. Kinsay mo conduct og interview? The person who will make the interview will be the polygraph examiner. Phase 2 will be the pre-test interview. Kung saan metabo sa pre-test, ang polygraph examiner will be interviewing the subject. Phase 3 is on the instrumentation. Meaning, muna ni katong test proper. Okay? Muna ni katong magsugod na sa polygraph examination test. Or polygraph examination rather. Ikaapat, ang ginatawag og post-test interview. Kinsay mo interview? Polygraph examiner. Kinsay gi-interview? Ang subject. So, itong binagsaon ni. In the first phase, which is the interview to the investigator, the examiner or the polygraph examiner gather facts about the case. interview the investigator, gather crime scene sketch, and interview witnesses. Aside nga i-interview to gather the facts, interview na niya ang investigator, in this phase also, the questions that will be used in the instrumentation will be formulated. Okay? Will be formulated. So, duha lang kabuok ang mahitabo sa phase 1. Una, the gathering of facts. Asa man siya mo gather sa facts? Katong tanan nga data. Katong deposition, unsay sworn statement sa complainant, sa witnesses, unsay incident report, unsay crime scene sketch, muna yung mga facts nga gi-gather sa examiner. Ikaduha, pag naa na kay facts already gathered, that's the time that you will formulate your questions. Okay? So again, duha lang may tabuan niya, the gathering of facts by taking a look on the crime sketch, on the interview of the witnesses, the deposition, the sworn statement, etc. Once the facts are already gathered, you now draft the questions. Okay? Phase 1. Sa phase 2, maunay mahitabo. Una ha, the briefing of the constitutional right. Okay? Unsa man ang constitutional right? The right to remain silent, the right to counsel, and those constitutional rights embodied under the Republic Act 4136 or the rights of the accused, as well as under the Bill of Rights under Article 3 of our Philippine Constitution. So dapat there has to be orientation or the briefing of the rights. Ikaduha, determination on the suitability of the subject. Okay? You have to determine whether the subject is physically, mentally, or emotionally fit to undergo for the polygraph examination. Because in the previous slide, kung ang tao wala nakatulog og 6 hours or 5 hours rather, ang may tamo ayaw siya gi-undergo og polygraph exam. Kung physically unfit siya, dili pwede siyang gi-undergo og polygraph examination. So again, unang may tabo, you have to brief, orient the subject about his constitutional rights. Sunod, you have to determine the suitability of the subject. Ikatulo, which is very important, is you have to obtain the consent of the subject. Okay? So after the briefing of the constitutional rights, you determine his physical, emotional suitability to undergo for the lie detector test. Then last would be, you have to obtain the consent. Okay? So asa naman mabilong ang evaluation of the subject psychological preparation and his personal data at na sa ikaduha kanang determination or the suitability of the subject. Again, tulo ang may tabuan ni ha. Briefing on the constitutional right, ikaduha, determination of suitability, ang ikatulo, determination or obtaining the consent of the subject. So let us just say humana ka sa phase 2 na nakay consent na natanan ang determination. Nakita nimo nga the subject is physically fit. So you na ka now proceed to instrumentation. Now in the instrumentation, these are the things that will happen. Number 1 is you will attach the components of the polygraph machine. So when I say attachment, you attach the Pneumograph, Pneumo 1 and Pneumo 2, you attach the Galvanograph, you attach the Accuracy Munay una ha, attachment of the components. Then number 2, you will review together with the subject the questions being prepared. Meaning, nakabalo na di ay ang dapat i-review nimo nga munay mga questions nga mugawas. Okay? Sunod, ikatulo, instrumentation proper na or actual test na. Okay? So, una again, attach nimo ang components. Ikaduha, i-review nimo yung questions. Kung wala na yung pangutana, magsugod na ka sa actual test. Tulo ang mahitabo sa phase 3. After you are done with phase 3, humana ka o lie detector test. Of course, you have to turn off the machine. Now, in phase 4, once you are already done with turning off the machine, what you will do is to analyze, examine the tracings. You look for specific responses, deviations, peculiarity, fluctuations that would show that the person might be deceptive on a particular question. And if you take a look, and based on your analysis, when you take a look on the polygraph, you found out that the person is deceptive in a specific area, what you do is you conduct interview. So, mingon siguro ka nga, kani ba nga question? The polygraph found out the machine recorded some deception or some fluctuations that will signify nga binaro ka ani unsa magay tinuod. So posible nga mo admit ang tao or mo confess. So once mo confess siya nga oy nasakpan naman ko so I have to confess, ang imong buhaton you make sure that the confession is into writing in the language known to the subject. Tapos make sure nga naay voluntariness na ang iyang pagsulat sa iyang confession, tapos na ang iyang abogado, and it has to be notarized. Okay? Ayaw og hatag og confession or ayaw og allow sa confession unless walay lawyer. Okay? Para dili ta ma-technical. Kinahanglan na ang lawyer in the obtaining of the confession or admission from the person, and it has to be in writing. Kung di siya kabalong in English, then put it in Cebuano or any language known to the subject. So we have the automatic nervous system. The ANS is part of the peripheral nervous system in that it consists of the motor portions of some cranial and spinal nerves. The automatic nervous system is the main effector mechanism which the polygraph is concerned. It governs the heartbeat, the pulse rate, the increase or decrease of blood pressure, expansion or constriction of the arterioles. So both ipasabot whatever happens, if a person will tell a lie, it will activate the automatic nervous system that will actually make changes on the heartbeat, pulse rate, the blood pressure, and the blood pressure of the person. So the question right now is, can a minor qualify for polygraph examination? The answer is yes, but there has to be a written consent from the guardian or from the parent. Can medication affect the test result? The answer is yes. That is why, according to the discussion a while ago, there has to be a gap, or in the taking of the polygraph examination, there shall be no taking of drugs 12 hours prior to the test, because that will affect the result. Any drug or medication that suppresses normal activity of the central nervous system will reduce the strength of the reactions found on the polygraph chart, resulting of a possible inconclusive result. Another question is, can a pregnant woman be subjected for polygraph test? The answer is, it depends. If in case, kusog na nga mo move, or there is movement, excessive movement sa bata sa sulod sa tiyan sa ginikanan, then therefore, dili pwede nga mo take siya og polygraph examination. Why? Because the movement can affect the result. But if in case, naapa siya sa like first month pa, nga pwede pa, wala pa yung movement, sa fetus, sa sulod sa tiyan, pwede pa nga makatake siya polygraph examination. Another question, is polygraph examination result admissible in court? The answer is yes. If allowed by the judge will not use polygraph result if an accredited and inexperienced examiner administered the test. So again, as I have stated in the previous discussion, the polygraph examiner must have extensive training on the field. Not just the extensive training, but he has to have experiences for court presentation relative to the utilization of polygraph examination. So kung baguanay pa lang, dili pa gud accredited, magka-problema ta. Because if the judge will rule that the polygraph examiner is inexperienced, then therefore, dili pwede siya nga madawat. Okay? The public's opinion on the result is not allowed in court under any circumstances. So, dili pwede mag-question nimo kung pwede ba ang polygraph o dili. If such evidence is admitted, the examiner's testimony does not incline to prove or disprove any element of the crime with which a defendant is charged, but at most tends only to specify that at the examination, the subject was not telling the truth. So, maulang na ang pwede ng imuhang gi-argue sa korte. If a person is lying, Dapat, ang iyang scope, pag present mo sa korte, is that you just have to say that the person is not telling the truth on this specific question. But it will not prove or disprove any element of the crime. Okay? It will not prove again or disprove any element of the crime. Ang iyahang trabaho sa polygraph result, that will only specify that during the lie detector test, the subject was lying on a specific question. Period. Diya lang taman ang utilization of polygraph examination result. So, mao ni mga cases that involved the use of polygraphy. There are many, but I only cited 3. People of the Philippines versus Amado Daniel, People of the Philippines versus Danilo Bahas, and Crescencia Isaguirre versus Elvira Isaguirre, and others. So, muna 3 of the many cases that utilize polygraph examination. What is the accuracy of polygraphy? Okay? The accuracy is at the range of 85% to 95%, while for experienced examiners, pwede siyang 91.4% correct judgment. For inexperienced, kalagmitan 77.5 lang ang accuracy. That is why ang training or experience na utilization of polygraph should be obtained. The next discussion will focus on the types of questions, the relevant, irrelevant questions, as well as the relevant, irrelevant technique in the conduct of lie detector test. And if in case there are questions that you want to write or post, you can post it in the comment section and I will give you the answer right the moment I take a look on these specific inquiries.